Hi my loves, welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you guys are new, it is so great to have you here. This is our first wrap up of 2025. This is our January reading wrap up. And I don't know what was in the air this month, but I feel like every single person I've talked to had an incredible reading month in the month of January. Myself included. I read some insanely good books this month. I don't think I had anything less than a 3 stars. And just the quality of books was insane. Like it was so good. I read a total of 10 books in the month of January. I think 4 or 5 of them were from my physical TBR for January, which I was really happy with. Out of those 10 books, 5 of those were fantasy, 2 of them were romance, and 3 of them were thrillers. I feel like that's usually my kind of stats. I usually have a few romance and thrillers amongst more fantasy, just so I can like split up my fantasy reading. Sometimes it gets a little bit intense, especially with some of the books I read this month. But overall, this was an insanely good month. So let's just get into it. Let's just start talking about it. I started the year with The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. Now, this book had been intimidating me for a long time. This is the 3rd book in the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. I started the Mistborn series actually a long time ago. I think I was about 17 when I read the first book and I wanted to reread it. So I reread it at the beginning of this year, then read Well of Ascension, which was just insane. Straight off the bat, this trilogy, this is the original trilogy, by the way. There are more books in this series, but they're kind of like spin-offs, I would say. But the original trilogy for the Mistborn series is a 5-star trilogy for me. This series, there is nothing I can fault about it. Not one tiny little thing I can fault. Brandon Sanderson is just an absolute genius, and this series was absolutely no exception. So The Hero of Ages is the 3rd book in the Mistborn series, and this was the best one yet. It was the kind of book where you're left staring at the wall for like 20 minutes after reading it, just trying to comprehend what you just read, where your characters ended up. There is so much action and political intrigue in this series. Finishing it kind of just feels surreal. Like there is so much going on that by the time you get to the end, you're like, have we actually just what? And that was literally me for 20 minutes after finishing this. Easiest 5 stars of the month, honestly. 6 stars, honestly. This is like an infinity star read for me. I just cannot believe it. So I'm not going to talk about this book specifically in the plot, but I'll talk about the beginning of the series because I'm not about to spoil everything for you. I'm not that kind of person. So in the Mistborn series, we are following Vin, and we are set in a world where people can channel magic and energy from certain metals, and certain metals give you different things. So for example, iron, if you pull iron, it gives you immense strength, like strength that a human shouldn't possess. Tin steals human senses. Zinc allows you to alter emotions of people. Like it is so interesting. So there's a whole little glossary at the back to kind of help you remember all this whilst you're reading it. The world we are set in is kind of after the bad guy has won. So years ago, the bad guy conquered this kingdom and they are basically living in a very oppressed society. Everyone is starving. If you don't abide by the law, and Vin is just kind of trying to survive this world. Then gets integrated with this kind of group of people who are trying to form a rebellion against the final empire. They're trying to overcome the Lord Ruler and take down this kingdom. So we're basically following a kind of rebellion, but it almost feels a little bit like a heist. Like they go undercover to balls, all that kind of stuff. It's so fun. It's so interesting. There is not one dull moment in this entire series, and like they're long books. But yeah, this was just like my favorite read of the entire month. I just started the year up here, and it's going to take a lot to get back up there for the rest of the year. I'm not gonna even lie. Like this was such an insanely good book. I then was lucky enough to receive an ARC copy of Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. I love Ali Hazelwood's books. I literally read every single one of her books that she releases. Bride is like my favorite one by her. But this is a very close second, if not tying for first. I was blown away by how much I liked this book. I loved our characters. Basically, this is a STEM romance, as Ali Hazelwood loves to write, but we are set in the swimming world. So our main guy protagonist, Lucas, he is a champion swimmer, and our main female protagonist, Scarlett, she is a diver. I liked having that little extra element to this book. Like it wasn't just a STEM romance, it was a little bit of a sporty romance as well. The chemistry between Scarlett and Lucas was insane. It was so good. I was literally giggling and kicking my feet during this because I felt like I was third wheeling this. Like it was so intimate. I loved the communication in this. I loved the way Lucas treated Scarlett. But I am pretty sure when I release this video, this book will be out, like the release date of. So go read it. Go read it immediately because I cannot wait for you all to talk to me about it. I am just obsessed with it. If you've read it already for some bizarre reason, please let me know what your thoughts are. It wasn't a 5-star read for me when I say I loved it that much. It was just a really good, fun, easy romance read. It was just really so digestible. It just made you kind of escape reality for a little bit, which is definitely what I needed after finishing Hero of Ages. It's just one of those books that makes you giddy whilst reading it. So I gave this a 4.5 rating. I loved it that much. As I said, it's up there with Bride. I love it that much. And also I'm just obsessed with this cover. I am obsessed with this ARC edition. I love the metallic hardbacks. Like they're so pretty. I then started a series that you guys have been begging me to read for the longest time. If you know me, you know that we read The Midorian Chronicles recently by Lynette Noni, and they became one of my new favorite favorite YA series that I've ever read. In finishing that, I was just in a Madoran Chronicles hangover, honestly, and I was like, what better way to get out of this hangover than start another series by Lynette Noni? So that is why I started the Prison Healer series by Lynette Noni. When I tell you I was so nervous going into this because I truly didn't think it was going to live up to the hype that was surrounding it, it lived up to every single second of it. Oh my god. I read this in part of my 24-hour readathon and it truly just feels like a fever dream. I am going to talk about the second book as well because I did end up reading that in January as well, just because I could not stop thinking about the ending of the first book. I read this a little bit later in January, but we'll just talk about them together. So the first two books in the Prison Healer series, there is one more. It is a trilogy. And basically we are following Kiva, who works in a prison as a healer, believe it or not. She's just doing that to survive the prison environment. Her and her father were arrested at a very young age, but her mother, brother, and sister all got away, and they have been saying that they are going to save her. They kind of send little clues to her saying that just hold in there, we're going to save you eventually. And it's been like, I think like 12 years or something, or 10 years, and she still hasn't been saved. So that hope is really slipping away from her. I would say this is YA dystopian as well, that we definitely have fantastical elements in it, but it just feels so much more like urban fantasy dystopian vibes. I loved our characters. I thought they were wonderful. I cannot stop thinking about them, if I'm going to be honest. And just the way Lynette Noni writes, you think you have everything figured out. You think you know what's going on, and you just don't. You just really, really don't. Somebody commented on my 24-hour readathon when I did this, saying watching people's reaction to the end of Prison Healer is like their favorite hobby, and I totally agree with that. I want to see everyone's reaction to the end of this because like, what the hell? And exact same for The Gilded Cage. I really didn't think we would be getting that many more surprises in the second book, especially just from where the first book left off, but I was wrong. I was so wrong. I'm really just learning this month that I cannot see plot twists coming from a mile away in fantasy books. The character development in this one was so great. I really felt like we got a deeper sense of our characters. We got a deeper sense of the world. For ratings, I gave The Prison Healer a 4.25 stars, and I gave this one a 4.5 stars. I am just loving this trilogy so much. I am kind of thinking that the third book in this trilogy might shape up to be a 5-star read, just because of how much I'm connecting to this world, to these characters. And as I said, I went in this thinking it was going to be severely overhyped. I was thinking I was not going to enjoy this, and I was just so wrong. We'll get the thrillers that I read out of the way as well. I read two by Freda McFadden. So the first one I read was The Inmate. I love Freda McFadden for my thrillers. Like, I really do. I feel like she always catches me off guard. I always think I have everything figured out in my head, and I just never really do. And the way she writes is just so easy to binge read. You can just get lost in her thrillers and read them in like one sitting, which is what I did with these two. So The Inmate by Freda McFadden, this was really interesting. We were set in a prison, and our main protagonist was the nurse for the prisoners, which, number one, can you imagine doing that? Like, oh my god, I feel like you'd have nightmares. I would, at least. And I feel like you just didn't really know the full story of anyone. Like, I was just constantly trying to like pick up these little things that everyone said and trying to put them together, and I just didn't. I like to think I could be a detective. I really couldn't. I'm really not that good. I gave this one a 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I will say, with my Freda McFadden books, I never give them extremely high ratings, but they're just those books that like, she never fails to catch you off guard. She never fails to just capture you and not let you go. So The Inmate was a 4 stars, and then I also read The Crash, which only came out on the 28th of January, I think. Obviously her newest release. This one was very different for Freda McFadden. This one was definitely a very different feel to what I was used to in her books. We are following our main protagonist who is pregnant, and she's meant to sign this contract that gives her a lot of money to like support her and her baby, except she kind of finds the deeper meaning to that contract, and she goes, I am not signing that. There is no way I'm signing that. So she calls her brother and like going, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life. I don't know what's happening. And he goes, come visit me at my ski lodge. He works at a ski mountain, I believe. And he's like, we'll figure it out together. I'll help you. I'll give you some shelter for now, just to come and visit me, and we'll figure it out. So she decides she's going to drive to him in the middle of a snowstorm, and she ultimately crashes her car because she's driving in the middle of a snowstorm and trying to talk on the phone at the same time. It just doesn't work. I'm not going to say too much from there because I feel like it's really interesting to see what happens, but it kind of gave No Exit vibes, if you know what I mean, if you've read that. It definitely gripped you, and I read this in literally one sitting. It was very easy to just binge read. I didn't love this as much as The Inmate, just because I felt like there was kind of less, because I feel like there was almost more like urgency aspect to it rather than like thrilling. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. Where could this go? I feel like it was more like a state of urgency. It was still really good, don't get me wrong. I gave it a 3.5 stars. It was really easy to read. Definitely recommend if you're going into a slump and if you like thrillers. Then the last thriller I read for this month was His and Hers by Alice Feeney. This was my first Alice Feeney book, and I know that so many people love her and she's like their favorite thriller author, and I've been meaning to get into her books for a long time, and this was on Kindle Unlimited. So I was like, you know what, let's just read it. This was good. I didn't love her writing as much as I thought I would. Maybe that's because I'm used to such a specific way of writing when it comes to thrillers, and I feel like she was definitely a little bit different, which was quite refreshing. I didn't guess this plot twist. I really didn't. I do want to read more of her books. I definitely want to read Rock, Paper, Scissors because I've heard incredible things about this one. But His and Hers, I gave a 3 stars. It was good. The main thing was the characters were really annoying me, but I do kind of feel like that was the point. I was meant to be annoyed at the characters, and I was meant to question every single character that came into view. Like, that's the point of a thriller. Would recommend, but just not my favorite thriller I've read before. I finally picked up Book of Azrael, which has been on my TBR. I haven't had it physically, but it's been on my like kind of mental TBR, my radar, for a long time, and I've been super scared about it because I don't typically read dark fantasies. I usually am more of just like fantasy romance or just basic high fantasies, honestly, but this is definitely a dark fantasy. However, I loved it. I loved it. I loved every single second. We're set in a world where there are like kind of these vampire creatures, but I would say they're more vampire monsters. Definitely not your Twilight vampire, that's for sure. But we are following Diana, who was recently in the possession, I guess you would say, of Caden, who is this like very, very powerful monster. He's a man, but he's got like monster attributes, I guess. The reason she's in custody of him is because she made a deal with him to save her sister. There is so much action in this, which I really, really liked. There is a bit of forced proximity, enemies to lovers, you don't know who to trust, all that kind of stuff. So I feel like it really kept you on your toes the entire time. And I can't wait to go on to the second book because I really, really enjoyed this one. Like, I was definitely kicking my feet and giggling. Like, it definitely gave that as a fantasy romance. And I do love that in my fantasy romances, but I also feel like it had pretty stable world building. Like, I really enjoyed the world. I really liked getting to know it. It was definitely a very dark atmosphere of a world. So skeptical going into this because, as I said, I don't read dark romances, but I would say this is very on the verge of a dark romance. I would look up trigger warnings before you go in just in case. There was a good balance of romance and plot, which isn't always the case, but I feel like there was in this one. Didn't connect to the characters in a way that it would make it a 5-star read for me, but I do think there's that possibility going through the series. Like, I do think I can learn to connect with them a lot more. I feel like there'll be a lot of character development throughout the series. I then read All Roads Lead Here. This was also on my TBR for the month of January. I've been meaning to pick this up for such a long time, and I am literally kicking myself for not picking it up sooner. I've read a few of Mariana Zapata books, and she is the queen of slow burn. She is the absolute queen of chemistry and slow burn. I haven't read a book that has given me this much like tension between the characters in such a long time. I feel like usually it's slow burn, but in the first 100 pages they're already together, and I'm like, come on, this, no. No, this was all slow burn. This was all chemistry. This was all building up the tension between them, and I loved everything about it. This is a small town romance. We are following Aurora, who's kind of traveling to every small town trying to find a place that makes her feel like home, and she ends up at the small town where she grew up in. However, she has a little bit of history there. Her mum was a big hiker and one day just never returned from her hike, so she's kind of got a little bit of past trauma in this town, but she's always felt a strong connection to it. She rents a place she finds on Airbnb, and when she turns up, she realizes that the person she rented it from was actually the son of the man who owns this place, and he did not consent to having his son list this on Airbnb, but his son was like we need the money. I just thought this was an easy way to make it. So after an argument, they ultimately decide to let Aurora stay in this little Airbnb place. So that means she is right across the road from her landlord, and this is like the definition of like grumpy sunshine. Like, I love it. She has such an outgoing, bubbly personality that is just so contagious, and he is so quiet, introverted, reserved, keeps to himself but knows what he wants, and there is something about that duo that just gets me every single time. Mariana Zapata just creates characters that feel real. Also, it's like single dad trope. I feel like we have a lot of tropes, but they're done very subtly. It's not like the obvious like just trope dumping in the romance books, which I don't always love. I gave this a 4.5 stars. So good. I then ended the month with everyone's most anticipated read, but for me this was my most scary read of the entire month, and that is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I have a reading vlog coming on it very, very soon, but for a little bit of backstory, I liked Fourth Wing. I thought it was really fun, really addictive, could not put it down, liked the whole world, loved the setting, didn't love the characters, and then going into Iron Flame, I was just kind of like, it was like a 3.5 star read for me. Like, I really didn't enjoy it that much, mainly because of the characters. I did like the plot, I liked what was going on, but the characters were just driving me nuts. So I was very iffy on whether I was going to continue this series or not. But then I started seeing a lot of people who had the exact same thoughts as me on Iron Flame going into Onyx Storm and being like, oh my god, this is so much better. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give it a go. I'm gonna give it a go. And I did. And I am very glad that I did. As I said, not gonna speak too much on it, but I am glad I just went into it and kind of put my other thoughts aside on Iron Flame. I feel like this was definitely a step up from Iron Flame. I really connected to a lot of the characters. Riddoch, I think that's how you pronounce his name. I love him. He was the best thing about this book. Solely the best thing about this book, in my opinion. I really struggle to connect to Violet and Xaden, and I don't really root for their relationship, which makes it a little bit hard going through this book. I don't know what it is. I really don't know. I like them as characters separately, but I just don't root for them together. I like Xaden. He's cool. I do love the representation of chronic illnesses in this, and the fact that Violet has one and she like just goes about life and it's just very much in the background, but like she's still dealing with it. Like I love that representation. We need more of that in our fantasy books, in our romance books, in every kind of book. Coming from a chronic illness girly, we need more. Very mixed thoughts, but mainly positive thoughts, which I really didn't think that was going to be the answer. Like I really thought I was going to hate this book. It was a bit of an emotional roller coaster, if I'm going to be completely honest. Anyway, those are the 10 books I read in the month of January. I hope you had a wonderful reading month. Thank you so much. And hey, well, why not do this again? I started doing it for a while, and now and then some of you comment a little fairy to remind me that you've watched to the end of the video. So if you've watched to the end of the video, comment a little fairy emoji below so I know. It literally makes my entire day that you guys watch to the end of my videos. It means the world to me. I love you all so much. Like you have no idea. I hope you had a wonderful reading month, and I hope you're having fun going into February. There are so many great releases coming. Thank you so much for watching again, and I will see you very soon.